have a conflict of interest, so I will continue to run the meeting, but I will refrain from any comment or action.
Chairman Castaneda,
Yes.
if you would, I wouldn't mind to knock it out early. Would it be okay if I recommend that maybe we do the adoption of the meeting schedule now and then do the resolutions after? I mean, the redevelopment plans after.
That's fine with me. Any objections from the board?
None.
Hearing none, then let's go to the adoption first, and then we'll work our way back. So, Mr. Dominguez, can we talk about the adoption of the 22 planning board meeting schedule?
Certainly. I hope that everyone has had a chance to review the draft schedule. It's based on the typical meeting date of the second Monday of every month, with the occasional date moved around for accommodation of holidays. In this case, looking at the calendar, I believe that the only one that has been moved around for holiday is the meeting in October, which has been relocated to the October 3rd date, where it would otherwise be on October 10th, because it conflicts with the holiday. So I don't know if there's anyone with any comments, wants to add anything to that calendar information.
I
Thank
do,
you.
Dan. This is Suzanne. The February meeting, I know it's only Valentine's Day, but is there any way to push our meeting a week prior to that and do it, I think it's the 7th?
I have no objection to that, but I would have to defer to the board on that item, but I don't have an objection to that.
Okay.
Is
Do
there
any other
anyone?
board?
Yeah, go ahead.
No objection from me. Bob Carter.
From my either.
So the appropriate action, Mr. Chairman, would be that there would be a motion to accept the calendar for next year's schedule with the amendment that the February 14th meeting would be changed to February the 7th at the same time. And that, if that motion passes, then that would be the agenda or the meeting schedule that would be posted and would be published.
Thank you.
To interject, public comment period first, though?
That's correct.
Okay.
So any other questions, comments from the board? If not, then we can move to public comment. All right, Dan, can you set us up for public comment on this?
Sure. I see that there aren't many persons on the call tonight, so I'm going to open it up generally for anyone who would like to comment on this calendar for 2022, anyone from the public. If you're on the telephone, *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on the computer, use a little microphone button and to unmute yourself. So if, is there anyone at all from the public who has any interest in commenting on the calendar schedule for 2022? Chairman,
I have a comment.
Oh, I guess we do. Hello, sir. Can I take your name?
Hello, good citizen. I just want to ask, why are we going to have in 2022?
If we can please, Mr. Chairman, if I may interrupt. I'm
Yes.
sorry. If we can please have your full name and address for the record.
Okay, my name's Christo. I live in Middlesex County. Can I continue?
Christo. You have a last
Christo
name
Metropolis, South Edison. May I continue?
and your address, sir.
My address, South Edison.
Okay. Is there a street address, sir?
Yes, Fox Road.
I'm sorry. You'll have to give us a house or a specific street address.
Fox Road, FOX.
Okay. Is there a house number?
Yes, but can I continue?
After you give us your full address, sir.
14,
Fox Road.
Edison, New Jersey, 14, South Edison,
Thank you, sir.
Middlesex County. May I continue?
All right, your 5 minutes begin now.
Thank you. Basically, what I want to ask for the calendar year 2022, because they're public meetings, they should be open up to the public. Are they going to be in person in the year of 2022, or are they just you just mark down all the dates that you're going to create virtual meetings?
Mr. Chairman, if I can answer this?
Go right ahead, Mr. Ithel.
Thank you. The guidance of the state of New Jersey is that these meetings can be held virtually. There has been no decision as to whether these meetings will be held virtually or in person in calendar year 2022. So as of now, will remain as virtual meetings until such time as they change.
Okay, well, Governor Murphy's a little sick in the head, so if we can start opening the meetings back to the public, I'd really appreciate that. I'd like to come in, and when I make my comments, I like to look at you guys in the eye, you know? I don't like this talking through a telephone, but I'm gonna come back later for later comments.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the public?
Chairman Castaneda, that was the only registered speaker.
Great, thank you. Then can I get a motion to approve with the
I was
standard-
speaking, thank you, you didn't hear me.
We did not hear
I
you.
was trying
We're
to
sorry.
speak.
Go ahead, caller.
May I speak now?
Yes, please provide your name and address.
Hi, yes, Danielle Moore, Somerset Street. Well, first I would like to say this is the only meeting that still recommends that you still
Yes.
give full address for the safety of anyone speaking anymore. City Council, you don't have to give full address. County meeting, Board of Education, no longer have to give your full address. Why with the Planning Board?
Mr. Chairman,
But
this is comments regarding next year's proposed calendar of meetings.
Correct.
Yes, I know what it is, but I still started off with stating that. One thing I will say, okay, this is next year starting off with 2022. Please tell me why is it Governor Murphy listing that the state is to be fully opened up again, the government employees. So please tell me why you feel that if the government employees are going back in January next month to fully open everything where it was listed last week, and you'll see it on Google as well. Why do you feel that the meeting cannot be opened back in public? Because you don't want to feel the pressure of everything that's going wrong. You don't want to hear the truth.
Mr. Ithel, my understanding is that this is the current recommendation to stay virtual? From the state?
We're in a virtual meeting state right now. If things change, then that will be published. This is a motion that would be considered by the board to adopt next year's meeting schedule. Whether it's virtual or it's live is not before this board today.
Great, thank you.
Oh, please, I hope you do go research what Governor Murphy say. Wow, everything with the state can be open. I don't see why, due to where the president, that we have for the planning board, same president for city council, where doesn't never have the time to listen to anyone, always in a rush to do that. You just don't want to feel the pressure. But I feel that the government is opening up. Wow, our kids are still in school. Wow, why is it not said for you to have a meeting?
Regarding comments to the proposed meeting schedule.
Right. So, Ms. Moore, you'll have an opportunity to discuss this, other matters to the public, but at this point, we're discussing the actual adoption of the meeting schedule, not the
I
format.
know, I don't know why you keep trying to change it like I don't know what you're saying, but my point is, wow, if everything else is open up, safe to open up, I don't see why it's not safe for you to have your meetings in public.
And I think what was discussed and at least afforded to you in terms of an answer was that would be taken into consideration once we're told that we can do that. Again, though, I'm going to move on unless you have anything specific about the actual dates. Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the calendar dates with the stated amendment?
It's
Bob
Chris
Carter,
Delto.
I'll move.
I'll second it, Chris Delto.
All right. Ella DeCecco,
Yes.
Suzanne Skor Ludwig,
Yes.
Chris Delatella,
Yes.
Ivan Adorno,
Yes.
Diana Lopez,
Yes.
Bob Cardica,
Yes.
Manuel Castaneda.
Yes. All right, thank you. Moving on, we're gonna return back to then, under public hearings A, amendments to the Farren redevelopment plan. As I stated earlier, due to the conflict of interest, I will refrain from providing comment or action on this particular section, but I will continue to run the meeting. And so, Mr. Dominguez, can you open up? your
Sure. But before we get started, before Mr. Ital swears me in, I think that at this point, then it would be prudent if Ms. Pinello or you, Mr. Ital, would handle opening up public comment, et cetera, during these portions of mine. Does that make sense? Or is that appropriate, rather?
Makes sense. Ms. Pinello, if you don't mind, what I'll do is I'll swear in Mr. Dominguez, and then I'll try to handle the public comment portion as well by taking names.
Sure, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, we have a witness for agenda item A, Mr. Dominguez, if I can swear him in, please.
Please do so.
Mr. Dominguez, if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give this board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And Mr. Dominguez, if you could please state your position and your title.
Thank you.
That would be the same.
I'm sorry?
I think that would be the same.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Thank you, board. Thank you, board attorney. My name is Dan Dominguez. As you know me as board secretary. Typically, I'm also the planning director for the city of New Brunswick, here to present amendments to 2 redevelopment plans, beginning with proposed changes to the Farren redevelopment plan. May I begin?
Dan, before you begin, I
Yes.
just have a comment and request. I know that you're going to fully explain all of these proposed revisions.
Yes.
But some of these, I may be more supportive than others. So I'm going to either recommend that we vote, depending on your explanation, that we vote individually on these, rather than as one group of amendments. But however, I'm not sure, if that's going to what issues that's going to create with regard to public comment, whether we would have to entertain public comment to each individual amendment. So I'm putting that out there as a suggestion for dealing with this in the event that I or other members, board members, are supportive of some amendments but not others.
Mr. Ital,
I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman, normally what happens is that the amendments to the redevelopment plan are proffered to us or forwarded to us from the governing body for consideration and for our opinion. We provide that opinion in the form of not approval or disapproval, either individually or collectively, but certainly a recommendation if there are changes that the board makes these recommendations. Mr. Dominguez is taking copious notes, I know, and Ms. Pinello is also taking notes. If there are comments made by Mr. Cardica that he is not in favor of a certain aspect of it, that will be forwarded to the governing body with the note that Mr. Cardica is not in favor of that. If the other members are in favor, I'm just using that as an example, it'll still go to the governing body for their decision whether to adopt the amendments to the redevelopment plan with or without those comments.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cardiga, does that satisfy your concern?
Well, I guess it does, but typically we vote to in favor or not in favor of the particular amendments. And we normally do that as, everything combined, all the amendments combined. So I guess what you're asking me to do is make comments about individual amendments to the plan that I may have comments on or disagreements with. But there will be a vote on these, on the plan amendments, correct?
To forward the comments of the board to the governing body, yes, that would be the nature of the vote. So if there are comments, for example, Mr. Kartika, if you made a comment about point A and 3 other board members also agreed with that point A, that it should be or should not be accepted, that comment would be forwarded to the governing body. What you're voting on is whether to forward those comments to the governing body.
Okay.
Generally, we've not had, as you are well aware, Mr. Kartika, generally what we have is we have a redevelopment plan or an amendment to a redevelopment plan that is presented to the board, and the board collectively either approves or disapproves that. You've brought up individual points that you have some comments on, so I'm affording the opportunity for those comments to be specifically forwarded as well. But the motion would still be for forwarding comments to the governing body.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, hearing no other issues, Mr. Dominguez, you can continue with your presentation.
You're on mute, Mr. Dominguez.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ital, and thank you, Chairman Castaneda. So as we begin, a couple of weeks ago, I forwarded to the board changes to 2 redevelopment plans, the Farron redevelopment plan and the downtown redevelopment plan. First up, we're tackling the amendments to the Farron redevelopment plan. Most of you would better know the site as the Hub. It's the current empty lot across the street from the New Brunswick train station next to the wellness parking deck, former site of the Farron Mall. To jump in to the changes, there was a memo that went along with it that tackled in small bites the pages that the changes were on and a small summary of said changes. So first, I would like to touch base on page 13 of the redevelopment plan. Page 13 of the redevelopment plan covers the permitted uses on the site. And this particular, these particular changes here would be 1, adding specifically medical, research and development, laboratory, and educational uses. There is, I think, a appropriate interpretation that under the prior language of the redevelopment plan, or let's call it the current language of the redevelopment plan, not the proposed language, that these would be subsumed within that language. But I think that given the emphasis of the meetings that we've seen, the groundbreaking, all the partners that are intended to be users of this site, Hackensack Meridian, Robert Wood Johnson, Rutgers, University of Tel Aviv, etc., that these uses be more specifically outlined so as to not cause confusion or friction later on in the redevelopment process, so that no one, down the road when this is at site plan hearing is splitting hairs on what actually is an office use or what actually is a high-tech use, etc. So this just sort of clarifies very specifically what is allowed. And then additionally, stating that any uses that are ancillary, subordinate, accessory to those uses are naturally to be accepted as acceptable uses. So for example, if we have a medical school on the site, that offices that are in the medical school, that service the medical school, are acceptable uses. If you have a janitor's closet, etc., things that would normally be in any type of building like this, should be naturally subsumed within the uses and not subject to, once again, I'll use the same term, hair splitting. So that's sort of the gist of the changes that we're looking to do on page 13 with the uses. If I may proceed, unless anyone from the board has any comments on those specific changes.
Dan, are any of the previous uses that were listed, is anything being removed, or is it just clarification and additions?
Not one use was removed.
Thank you.
All right. So proceeding forward, there was language in the redevelopment plan requiring a sky plane setback. The sky plane setback is a setback that begins at a predetermined height and then typically creates an angle that goes upward to create essentially separation between buildings above a certain height point. The downtown zone, the main downtown zone, not the redevelopment zones, the C4 zone, which is the downtown commercial zone, has a sky plane setback. Now, the reason that we're carving out the sky plane setback altogether from this plan is because we are looking to essentially crack the sky plane setback requirements open and revisit them to be potentially a better fit. To date, I am not aware of any downtown development that did not receive a variance, at least some sort of variance, on the sky plane setback. Not one of the developments that came in was wholly compliant with the sky plane setback, and the boards have granted variances and deviations every time. It hasn't been, hundreds of applications, but it's been all of them since that's been adopted. As such, there's clearly some kind of disconnect between what is required in a sky plane setback in our code and what's feasible. And the boards have seemingly agreed with that by granting relief on all those topics. So for now, one of the goals is to not, especially with the redevelopment plan, to not create unnecessary hurdles for development. And I think that potentially something that's always being granted relief may be pretty strictly an unnecessary hurdle. That's not to say the sky plane setbacks aren't useful. They are. Our existing standards seem to not be conforming to the both being useful and matching real world needs and possibilities. So I think that this is one of those times where we begin to just pare that down and in the future look to replace our standard with something that fits. Now, one of the main reasons that you look for sky plane setbacks is that you want to try to avoid what's called canyoning, which is too many large buildings in incredible proximity to each other, which just sort of, just create canyon effects in roadways. These buildings at the hub are quite distant from any incredibly large buildings, especially on the primary frontage of the site, which abuts, I guess technically it's French Street there, but French Street / Albany Street, Route 27, cross street from the train station. It's quite far from the train trestle, and then the train trestle keeps expanding further out away from the site. And then the train station itself is quite short. The wellness deck is a tall structure, but the hub building should be significantly taller, avoiding any possibility of canyoning effect on that street as well. So that's sort of the gist. Basically, that the sky plane setback is essentially, as written, was / is incompatible with feasible development, and we need to take that back to the drawing board for the zone as a whole. But for the redevelopment plan, we're just removing it since it doesn't seem to be necessary, nor do we have a current good fit for what would be a good sky plane setback. So if there's any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them from the board. Otherwise, I'll move on.
So Dan, this is Bob Kartik again. I did notice in the existing plan, the concern over this canyoning effect. And I see you've tried to explain why that is not that much of an issue. Is it your feeling that, because I kind of agree that, having streets that are just completely darkened by tall buildings without any kind of setback requirements is it's a concern,
Mhm.
So your feeling about this is that the hub area or is small enough so it's not going to matter. The footprint of it is small enough so it's not really going to be a concern in this case.
No, I would say that not necessarily that the hub site is small. I think it's quite a decent sized site. It's pretty much an entire city block, maybe 2 city blocks technically. But that its proximity to other very tall structures essentially makes the canyoning effect a non-effect. You have the Spring Street building, One Spring. It's quite a distance away from the development site. Then you don't have any really tall buildings until you hit the Standard, the Pack, which are also like 2-3 blocks away or more. You don't really have any immediate. And then across the street, you have obviously the building that's the View, I think, that's right next to the train station that has a walkway that leads to it. And then you have the other building across the street from it on Easton. But those are 100 feet plus away across Albany. There wouldn't be any canyoning effect on Albany. The side streets on the site, in this case, Kirkpatrick on one side and then Spring on the other, while narrow, are also both mostly south facing, so they will continue to still get quite a bit of light, and that they won't be impeded by the building of the hub site.
And I'm assuming that that this is more attractive to a developer because it would provide for greater square footage, right? Considering the height requirements, you can have a more square footage in the same footprint, right?
I'm sure it would be. I think that the site has a floor area ratio of I think the whole site at 12 and the individual buildings of up to 20. So I think that would control what gets built and the intensity of what gets built more than the skyplane effect. I think that just adding angles to the building creates more challenges and it doesn't necessarily produce any positive effect on this site that we're looking to productively redevelop. And like I said, seemingly every building has gotten some semblance of a skyplane variance. Now it's very common for developers to still include some setbacks on the way up on the building for aesthetic purposes, essentially like mezzanine patio areas, places to eat outside, or just hang out. I guess there's many reasons for it. In residential buildings, you might see what you might call play areas, green roofs, patios, gyms, etc. That's not really something we're going to see on a lot of the early likely development of this site, which is probably going to be non-residential in the early phases. But you still may see it for architectural choices as well as just creating space for some of the uses to have a bit of an outdoor area on the building itself. But it's hard to figure out how the skyplane would add any benefit there, at least as written in the plan right now.
Okay, well, thanks for the thorough explanation.
You're welcome. Okay. Proceeding to the next piece on page, where is it? I wrote down page 15, but I think that was before. I think I put page 15 because that's where parking requirements begins. But the actual change is reflected on page 17 at the end for commercial and industrial, essentially non-residential uses. The buildings, the hub site is going to be home to, hopefully, a large mix of non-residential uses. So we're talking research and development, medical school, medical office, laboratories, etc. The items in particular that we discussed at the beginning that we wanted to add in to be very specific about, to make sure that it was very clear and that those were permitted items. Among other things, there are going to be restaurants, cafes, etc., businesses on the ground floors potentially. There's going to be potentially tens of businesses and different entities in one solitary building. To that end, I think one of the best effects that we could do here to streamline that for planning purposes is to create a universal parking standard for the non-residential uses. In this case, the number that I came up with and I'm recommending is 0.6 spaces per 1,000 square feet. These spaces will be, well, I'll get into that later, but because that's a separate item in the plan. But so at 0.6, it reflects one, the proximity to the rail and other public transit. It reflects the possibility of people who live in a lot of the newer buildings downtown to be able to walk to work. They may be living there. There's a lot of new housing that went up in proximity to this site that the, let's call it the eds and meds, and in this case, STEMs, who may be working there, maybe doing research there, maybe doing medicine there, may want to live nearby. 0.6 is not an atypical number for a downtown, particularly one as dense and as public transit accessible as ours and walkable. And yeah, so that's basically the gist there. Is accessibility through transit and non-car means is relatively high at this site, and having a universal number makes it streamlined for divvying up the building for the different uses, because you don't have to say, okay, well, this use has a parking issue because this use is calculated at X while this use is calculated at Y. And while that may make sense in a grand scheme, you know, citywide or through a whole corridor, through sort of more of a planned site like this, it doesn't really add any benefit to deviate from different permitted planned uses on the site from a parking requirement standpoint. So that's the goal of the universalization of the number. So before I go into the next bit with the wellness site, I'll float back to the board if there are any questions or comments.
Mr. Dominguez, this is Suzanne. I have a question. So I think you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I think you're aware that the council passed the use of a pilot, that we have that tool available to us now. And this seems like it would be the appropriate place to foster the functionality of a transit hub to have that included in this plan. Do you have any comment about that?
I think that is more of a fit for the other site that we're going to be discussing tonight. But I think that this plan is more adequately designed, this one in particular. I think the downtown amendment might be a good fit for that comment. I think this one's more particularly designed, especially with the proximity to the wellness deck. And that's what I was going to get at in the next bit, was that the preference in the plan that the wellness deck host the parking from this site, and that the developer enter into a formal agreement with the parking authority for parking spaces at the wellness deck, and should they need, add one of the other nearby parking decks to the site.
That makes more sense to me now then, but it's something that we should talk about when we get to the next plan, I think. I would just like to hear a little bit more about it if we can involve it in that. But that's
Okay.
it for now. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other board comments or questions before I proceed? Okay. Jumping over to the wellness. The wellness site is with the hub slated to basically be sort of a development gem of R&D and medicine in the heart of downtown, right next to the train station. It would, in the opinion of myself and the city, be sort of a shame to put on-site parking on the site when we have available parking facilities that can accommodate the demand of the site so nearby. And in particular, you have the wellness deck, which I believe is the largest deck in the city of New Brunswick, at least as constructed. I don't remember the exact parking numbers in it. It may be smaller than the currently approved Cancer Institute parking deck, but it is quite a large parking deck. It's going to be some, 50 feet away from the park, from the hub. It's a very prudent place to locate with a formal agreement the parking demand of the hub site into the wellness deck. And should the wellness deck come up short on a few spaces, both the View deck, the Church Street deck, and the New Street deck are not that far away should they be needed to be accessed, particularly the one at the View, as we have existing capacity at those sites. And that may be a better way of accommodating the development on the site without imposing on-site parking on a site that will have buildings and potentially pedestrian areas and parklets of sorts in the final development plans for the site. So that's sort of the gist of why we'd like to require that the parking be met at a facility such as the wellness, which is right there and can accommodate the required parking facilities.
Dan, this is Bob Cardigan.
Yes.
So this is the of the amendments that you're including in this plan. This is the one that concerns me the most. I mean, first of all, even though there's a train station across the street and a hub for bus transit, this is New Jersey, and people like to drive cars no matter how miserable it is. And my concern is that you're just kicking the can down the road for passing the requirement for additional parking onto a future location and a future decision that would become before the planning board and potentially at the cost of New Brunswick residents. Is there any guarantee that no matter what is developed on the site, that the existing parking is going to be sufficient to accommodate, all of the businesses and residents and others that are going to use this site? It just seems short-sighted to me, and just seems like something that we're asking for a problem in the future that's going to impact New Brunswick taxpayers. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Currently, there is a decent bit of demand in the existing parking decks in the city. A lot of that's COVID related, but a lot of that's not likely to change in the future. We do have increases in demand and restaurant activity and what have you with the downtown closure and a lot of the excitement and buzz around that. But a lot of the study and a lot of work, it has gone remote or hybrid, and a lot of it's not coming back, at least not anytime soon. The parking demand can be more than adequately met for this site at existing structures in town. Beyond that, for future developments, as Ms. Sikora Ludwig mentioned earlier, the city actually has recently adopted a payment in lieu of parking ordinance, which requires developers, should they be deficient on their parking, to pay into a trust of $5,000 per space that the city will use for either the provision of more parking or facilities and projects that will reduce parking burden, such as funding shuttles and the like. So on a long-term facility, we've created a mechanism that will get from developers who aren't providing on-site parking funds that we can use to, one, create new parking should be needed without directly burdening the taxpayer, and secondly, to mitigate the need for parking by creating things like shuttles and subsidizing other means as they come up that would reduce the demand for people to actually want to drive around directly from A to B, whether it be park and rides or what have you. But that mechanism has been created very recently. I think it was adopted at the first or second meeting in November. So I don't think we've actually had a project be subject to it yet. But going forward, all the projects for the zoning board and planning board that come up short will have to pay some kind of factor at about $5,000 a space into that fund for those purposes.
All right, well, it's good to know. I appreciate that. That's nice to know that there's some consideration to this, but should the board decide to pass this redevelopment plan onto the governing body, I think it should be clear in the minutes that there's at least one board member that's really skeptical that that parking will be accommodated with existing structures, and there's not going to be another problem, a potentially highly costly problem down the line. I'm just very concerned about that. And I understand the need to make this attractive to a developer, but that just seems like a high potential cost down the road.
Mr. Dominguez, are you done with your presentation, or do you?
No, but I am done on the parking bit. There's a couple of more subsections to go.
If there's no more comments on the board on that, you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Proceeding to pages 31 and 32, the city, the redevelopment plan had, in my opinion, quite an onerous requirement of sign regulation for what the structure is, or what these structures are to be and should be. There were adjustments made, one, to fit the scale of the building. The sizes were arguably too small, given the size of the building. Any very small sign would be dwarfed by the building. You wouldn't be able to tell who is there. You wouldn't be able to tell it's Robert Wood Johnson or Rutgers or University of Tel Aviv, etc. So essentially, the branding of the building, of this sort of, let's call it a cornerstone of the city, would be highly diminished by the existing signage regulations. And in the memo, there was a photograph of a couple of signs that the right next door wellness deck had at a hair above ground level, and at the top for demarcation and branding, and a couple of signs on Robert Wood Johnson that are quite large relative to the facades on which they rest, demonstrating where Robert Wood is, etc., and who they are. So now this building is much larger than both the Robert Wood building and the wellness deck that had those signs. But the idea was to create proportional buildings, proportional signage regulations that would allow similar signs in terms of scale relative to the building facade to be allowed on these buildings. Now, we have to remember that, the wellness deck right here, I think it's about a hair over 100 feet the Robert Wood Johnson building there is probably about 100, 120 feet. The wellness deck, the hub site allows for heights up to 350 feet, which are the largest in the city. Even relatively large signs, let's call them that, relatively large signs, such as the ones that you see on the Robert Wood Johnson facade and the wellness deck facade, would be kind of hidden, not hidden, I guess that's not the correct word, but they wouldn't stand out from the size of the building. So we created permission for there to be much larger sign scale so that they could operate at 5% of the facade area. The goal here is that at 5% of the facade area, you could have quite a large building when you have, let's say, a frontage of 100 feet by a height of 350 feet. You could have a very massive sign. Now, I don't think that the developer has any interest in developing an incredibly massive sign, but 5% of a facade is relatively small. And by comparison, the Robert Wood Johnson image has a facade there. It's a facade between the two signs of about somewhere between 10 and 20%. So, and they don't seem enormous. They're big. They're obviously big, but they don't seem enormous. And 5% on a much larger building is not going to seem that big. And we would want the signs and the branding and whatnot to stand out and be flexible for all the different users of the building to be able to be labeled and have their say and stamp on the exterior of the building, as we want this building to be essentially shown off as a prize and, like I said, a cornerstone of the city's downtown development.
And if I may, are you at a stopping point where I could ask a question?
Yes, you may.
I'm good with the larger signs that you're speaking of now. I have an issue with smaller signs that might be at, say, cafes or restaurants on the ground level. These scrolling signs, the blinking signs, I would like to see a prohibition on them. I don't think they should be permitted in the area. I don't think they lend to what we're trying to do down there. And I don't know if there's any way to even have a discussion about that, or if anybody else has an opinion about that.
So to that effect, actually, there's language in the plan, in the existing plan, that prohibits signages that have flashings, pulsations, and scrolling, with very rare exception, if any. So those types of items are actually typically prohibited in our existing zoning code, and just pulling up a Control F pulls up two different sections under message center signs and digital display signs that have prohibitions on flashing, pulsating, and scrolling.
Oh, okay. I thought it said in there that they were permitted. And I know because we have them on Eastern Avenue, we have them on, you see them on French Street. But if they're prohibited, maybe it's just a matter of enforcement then. But
Yes.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Not a problem.
You can continue, Mr. Dominguez.
Thank you. Next up, on page 45, there is discussion about the Church Street vacation. The plan for how the vacation will occur or has occurred, which it hasn't yet, is stale. It's no longer factual. The city has extended out for a couple of times the closure of the street, primarily because in its current state, it's not really in any way, shape, or form safe or ready to be opened up for cross access. The site is probably intended to vacate and create a contiguous development site. There may be internal roads that are developed on the site or passageways, but in the long term, or rather the hopefully short to medium term, there will be a formal vacation of Church Street. But for now, the city is just going to continue, I think, extending it. It's extended through at least, I want to say, October or November of next year. And at which point, once it's under development, formal vacation will occur. So the original plan that was in there, which was to allow for 2 years and then to kick it back, or if there wasn't a redeveloper, is just not applicable anymore. And so that language was just purged from the plan. Additionally, there was some language in here about the Easton Spring Connection Project with some hypothetical layouts for how Easton and Spring Street will connect or would connect per the vision of the original plan as it was adopted a few years ago. The county did create a plan, and it's actually under construction right now. If you've been on Easton Avenue, you've seen a lot of the work being done. There is an approved Easton Spring connection. It doesn't actually match up with any of the ones that were hypotheticals in the original plan here. To my knowledge, it's going to be basically a straight line that connects Easton to Church Street, carving out a little, let's call it a nub of this site, which will be something to be considered for either development, park, et cetera, in the future, to be determined. But since one, we didn't match up with what was in this plan as what ended up being in reality in the hypotheticals. We took that out, and two, the county already adopted a real plan, which is under effect. Bouncing around hypotheticals was essentially pointless. So those items were removed from the plan. And on page 51, I removed the language of mandating that the blue area on the site plan, not a site plan, but I guess it's a plan, hypothetical plan of the site, be the pedestrian parking areas. Pedestrian pathways, as the site, depending on how it ends up getting developed, may have better layouts constructed for pedestrian activity, plus the Easton Spring connection kind of carving off a sliver of the site makes the hypothetical site imprudent. So instead of making it a requirement, it's now a preference, essentially a recommendation to the developer or would-be developer that they should look to put it in this place, but that it's not a variance or deviation or deal breaker that they don't, but that these would be preferred sites and that they should consider them for those purposes rather than mandate them, as the site requirements may, like I said, render these impractical, or there may be preferable places that an aerial two-dimensional map didn't accommodate for that are better to meet those needs. And those are the changes to the Farron plan.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. Are there any more questions or comments from the board?
All right, this is Bob Cardick again. Dan, this
Yes.
Easton Spring connection.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure I appreciated what that was about. So this was eliminated from the plan, excuse me. And instead there's going to be some kind of if you took Easton Avenue and extended that to Church Street, that is something which is under construction now. Did I catch that?
That is correct. Yes. I didn't do it myself. But yes, Easton Avenue is more or less being extended through Church Street. One of the main goals of this is to where, let's call it French/Albany and Easton meet in front of the train station is kind of a really bad, messy intersection. The goal
yeah.
is to create more of a conventional four-way intersection. And so Easton would come up all the way to Church, and Spring Street would continue to exist. And I think, so don't quote me on this because I'm not an engineer and I wasn't a part of the road design there. I believe that Spring Street, the nub between Albany and Church, is going to go in the opposite way. So you could go down Church and make a right onto Route 27, going sort of, let's call it toward Highland Park.
I see.
Between the little triangle of sorts that's going to get built there.
And that little appendage that would be kind of cut off, you're thinking
Yeah.
might end up being a public park?
It's too early to tell. I don't suspect that it'll be conducive to private development, but it may. That's still really, really early phases, as the sliver doesn't exist yet, right? So sort of once the cut through happens, the sliver can be assessed on its own and actually visualizing it relative to its surroundings and see how to proceed on it. It may end up being, too small for a park, or maybe a park makes sense, or maybe it's like some sort of passive area. There's a lot of little businesses, eateries, cafes, etc. on that side of Albany Street. And there may be other businesses on the hub that you might want to go over there and have a cup of coffee at some tables. I don't know. I'm just really spitballing on this because there hasn't really been any discussion on what the future of the sliver is.
Okay, I just wanted to understand kind of the street configuration that's being contemplated. Thank you.
Yeah. That the intent, I think, is for that to be done about this time next year, completed. For just a little additional piece of context.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But that's it on the Farron plan.
Thank you. Any more board members with comments or questions? All right, hearing none, Mr. Eithel, if I can ask you to move us into public.
Certainly. There are still just a few number of members of the public who I see on the board. So at this time, what I'd like to do is, if I may, ask if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on this proposed amendment to the redevelopment plan. You'll have an opportunity, if you unmute yourself, if you're calling in, to hit *6. If you're on the platform, the WebEx platform, there is a mute and an unmute button on the lower portion of your screen. If you can hit that, if you could just give me your name, and what we'll do is we'll set up a time for orderly presentation of any comments that you may have. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on this redevelopment plan? The amendment proposed?
I have comments.
Danielle Moore?
Okay, if I could just get the first person that spoke, who said he had comments, his name?
Can I proceed without giving my name?
No, if I could take your name down so I could get all of the individuals first.
Okay, my first name's Christo.
Christo, and your last name?
Christo from South Edison.
I'm sorry, your last name again, sir?
I didn't say my last name. I said South Edison.
Okay.
That's
Why
why
don't we move
reside.
the next person, and the young lady that, if you can.
Danielle Moore?
Ms. Moore, thank you. Are there any other members of the public?
Did you put my name down, Christo Macropolis?
Are there any other members of the public who would like to comment? Okay, hearing none. Is it Mr. Macropolis?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can. If you could please spell your last name, sir.
M-A-K-R-O-P-O-U-L-O-S.
R-O-P-O-U-L-S.
L-O-S, yes.
Mr. Macropolis, your address for the record, please.
South Edison.
Again, your street address for the record, please.
Fox Road. I'm feeling intimidated by having to say my street address because the law does not require me to state my address.
Okay. Mr. Macropolis, Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board shall be the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, it is.
You'll have 5 minutes, sir, and your time begins now.
Okay. Well, one question I have is, I want to know if it's standard operating procedure for corrupt developers to pay off New Brunswick Planning Board members. That's
Mr.
what it seems
Petropoulos,
to
do you
me
have any
here.
comments or questions regarding the proposed amendments to the redevelopment plan?
Yes. Well, can you name some of the amendments for me?
Mr. Dominguez, did you want to name some of the amendments for him? I'm not really sure that I understand the question.
Yeah, sure. Give me a second to pull it up. Where is it?
Basically, just so I know what I can speak on, because I don't have the in front of me. I'm just waiting to speak on altogether everything Mr. Dominguez
Sure.
had spoke on.
Sure. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll just rattle them off real quick. There were changes, clarifications to the uses on the site to clarify for medical, R&D lab, and educational uses, the elimination of the sky plane setback requirement, a universalization and setting of 0.6 parking spaces per 1,000 feet of non-residential uses, the explicit request to locate parking at the wellness deck right next door, the adjustment of the sign regulations to better allow for appropriate signage on the site given the scale of the building, removal of the language regarding the Church Street vacation on how that was supposed to potentially go as it was handled differently, removal of references to the Eastern Spring Connection project because the hypotheticals in the plan were not utilized and the county is actually under construction on a Eastern Spring Connection at this moment, and removal of the language.
I'd like to take my time back and speak about the parking, please.
The time is still running,
All
sir.
right. I agree with one of the planning board members. I don't, how you can't make Farron pay to put up more parking at some other site before they even start this. I do think that later on the New Brunswick taxpayers are going to have to pay for this. It's just going to be even crazier. Are we going to have public comments on the overall right after this? Not just amendments, but would I be able to speak on the overall?
Public
There's the
comments will be open at the end.
Okay, I'm gonna let Miss Danielle Moore speak, and I'm gonna come back at the end and thank you for not bullying me all the way into forcing me to say my address. When it's not lawfully required, I relinquish my time for now.
Thank you.
Ms. Moore, do you swear or affirm the testimony you provide shall be the truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And if you could state your address for the record, please.
Somerset Street.
Thank you.
And like I said, for the record, due to where this is the only meeting now that still forces people to tell their address, which is not safe anymore. I will start off by saying great job, Mr. Dominguez, on making the report due to where for people who doesn't have paperwork in front of them. A great job with explaining everything. But as of now, I say the planning board should not vote on this due to where I see it's poor communication between the planning board and the county. We're not knowing what's to be done for sure due to where at the last one of the county meetings due to where, wow, it was saying the plan was not even put through yet. And why did Mayor Cahill, Governor Murphy, President Rios even have this groundbreaking due to where you never had the design? What was to go in Farron Mall? Was this to look good or something? Because like I said, announced at the county meeting due to where there wasn't even a plan to be done yet. So why did they even do groundbreaking? Very sad to see. And like I said, I say you should not vote on this until you continue to see what the plan is that's going to take over a year replacing all of the sidewalks and everything from the county, which is a big thing, due to where what? how you have so many projects going on where, wow, you're just bringing the dirt from Somerset Street where you're doing the cancer center to build up around there to fill that hole up due to where, and they said they're filling that hole up with all the debris is to do the project to replace the sidewalks along Eastern Avenue, French Street, Albany, all down there. So like I said, until one project is done, that's when you should really vote on, not due to we're not guessing, oh, is this road going to go into what street, what is going to be here, what is going to be there. I have to say, wow, once again, this is with the planning board, very unorganized due to where same situation with the school system and the cancer center. We're disappointing how, wow, you see the cancer center is built, but nothing doing with the school over there. Still not on the time that was mentioned. And I said, come on, it's good to hear some of you speaking up for the concerns after how it was a lie saying no taxpayers' money would be used to support that school over there. How the county and the city, how much money they have put out over over $500,000 to $1 million to go towards that school. And yes, like I said, due to where it's going to be an issue with parking, due to where it's already overpopulated. It's amazing how 20 years ago the mayor said, "Oh, I do not want any high-rise buildings in New Brunswick." But wow, what all you see going up now, surely not good. Due to where, wow, never know what Mother Nature can send in due to where extremely too many high-rise buildings going up in New Brunswick. Like I said, I do hope you take me seriously, but like I said, we're not voting on this, just saying yes, 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 until some of you reach out to the county and finish the listen to see what the plan is with the road plan first before you can say a final decision on how the building is going to be. Too much guessing. Ooh, whether this is going to be a park here, ooh, whether this road is going to go into this road. I say it's just best that you wait until the county gets finished, which they're saying this project will take up to at least a year or so, with replacing all the sidewalks, the curbing, and changing the roadway down there.
Ms.
So,
Moore,
like I
one
said,
more
too much of a guessing game.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Mr. Chairman, those are members of the public.
Thank you. So we'll close public comment at this point. Can I get, is any board member willing to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes.
as Mr. Kartik had indicated in the beginning, he did have some reservations, and perhaps this would be the appropriate time if there is a motion to recommend the amendments as they are. Mr. Kartika or other members of the board can state their concerns that would be included in the comments being transmitted back to the governing body.
That sounds fine to me. I'll open it up to the board if that's amenable to the board.
This is Suzanne. I'll make a motion to approve.
It's Chris Deltel. I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Ithal, are you still continuing to do, will you be doing roll call?
I will do roll call. Mr. Kartika, there were some concerns that you had indicated about parking being provided on site rather than off site. Am I misstating your concern?
No, you're not misstating my concern. Again, I feel that the amendments as proposed are short-sighted in not requiring parking to be taken into consideration as part of this plan amendment. If the board is going to proceed with voting on this as proposed, I intend to vote no.
Mr. Kartika, if your vote would be no, then it would be that it not be referred back to the governing body with recommendations to approve it. However, if you would like to vote yes with the exception of the parking, you can certainly do that as well. Mr. Chairman, if I may call roll on this. So just to clarify, and I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I took the attendance a little bit out of order as folks came in. And I'll call Mr. Cardica last if that's okay. Ms. Sikora-Ludwig,
Yes.
Mr. Adorno,
Yes.
Ms. Checo, Ms. Checo, you're muted. I'll come back. Mr. Stellatella,
Yes.
Ms. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Castaneda, you had abstained, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Checo, if you can unmute. Ms. Checo? I still see her on the screen. I don't know if there's a way that we can unmute it from our end. Mr. Cardica, if you wanted to, as I stated earlier, I want to make clear that you can vote no, which would be that you do not recommend the governing body or the recommendation of the planning board. You do not agree with that the governing body should take the recommendations into account. You can vote yes with the exception for the parking, your comments included, or you can vote yes without the comments. But if you wanted to state that now, perhaps we could do that, and then I'll come back to Ms. Checo.
I'm voting no, and again, the minutes reflect the justification for my vote.
That's correct. Okay, and Ms. Checo, I do not see Ms. Checo online anymore. Mr. Chairman, I believe we've lost Ms. Checo, so we will make the recommendations with Ms. Checo showing as a, I guess it would be an absent at this point because she was disconnected, but prior to a vote.
That's fine. We're still at quorum, correct?
That's correct. We're still at quorum, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, we have one other matter. Mr. Dominguez is still sworn. If you can please present that matter and the amendments proposed to the redevelopment plan.
Go ahead, Mr. Dominguez.
You're muted. Mr. Dominguez, you're muted.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I just figured it out. Yep. Hi. If I can take a minute and just top off my water real quick, and I'll be right back. Thank you for bearing with me. All right. So, next up, we have the, well, I guess that would be for the chair to introduce the next application or hearing.
Yes, that's fine. Just give me one sec. Okay. Going into the public hearings part 5B, amendments to the downtown redevelopment plan. Mr. Dominguez, if you can be sworn. Well, we'll continue with you being sworn in if you can start your presentation at this point.
And for just to clarify the record, Mr. Chairman, you are not recusing yourself on this matter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if you can inquire whether any other board members feel that they have a conflict of interest or they feel that they have an interest that needs to be explored as to whether recusal is appropriate.
Are there any board members that feel that they have a conflict of interest? Please state so now. Okay, hearing none, you can continue.
Actually, not to create a, I guess, let's not call it a surprise, but let me just, Mr. Ital and Mr. Castaneda, I believe that the site in question incorporates the block in which New Brunswick Tomorrow's offices are located. Therefore, I believe Mr. Castaneda may be conflicted.
Okay. If that's the case, then I will recuse myself as well.
I will, I'll just defer to the attorney, to our attorney here, but I didn't want to drop it in as a surprise.
No, it's in an abundance of caution. It's always best, Mr. Castaneda, if you recuse yourself from actual participation in the hearing portion, of course, you'll be conducting the meeting, but you will not participate in any comments or the vote.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Dominguez?
Yes, thank you. So with this one, the downtown redevelopment plan. This is the amendment to an existing redevelopment plan. The downtown redevelopment plan was first adopted at the end of 1977. Actually, it's been amended about a dozen times since then. Last known amendment, per my records, is January of 2009. So this is would be the 2022 amendment to it, since it wouldn't be adopted until next year by the governing body, should they act favorably on the proposed amendments. This amendment is a little bit more small in scope and scale. I think that the best place to begin, and I know that regrettably, that Word to PDF conversion decided to lop off parts of some of the maps that I included on here. The maps are pre-existing maps. I actually only amended one of the maps. That's on page 19. It's map 6, redevelopment sub-areas, and then it cuts off. The good news in this case is that the only change to the sub-area map is the creation of sub-area 14, which thankfully did not get truncated by the Word to PDF conversion. Underlying 14 was sub-area 5. So that's the yellow sub-area that encompasses a lot of the downtown area in terms of redevelopment plans. So that's what was there before, to give, I guess, a quick history lesson on the subject. Now, to go a little further as to the why, let me pull up where sub-area 5. So, get lost on these huge plans sometimes. 6, 5I. Okay, I thought that was a 1, but it's an I. So for sub-area 5, there was a creation that the sub-area would just be controlled by the underlying zoning. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. As a redevelopment plan, it's especially for the downtown area with a relatively flexible downtown code, just deferring to the code or any underlying code in a redevelopment plan sometimes does not generate the desired effect, because part of the purpose of developing a redevelopment plan is to create essentially a zoning standard of sorts, if you will, that is more encouraging of potential development than more encouraging of than what is the underlying code. To that effect, as I stated earlier, we created sub-area 14. Caller 6, can you mute yourself? Thank you. And so if we proceed to page 33, which has sub-area 14, which is under letter R, the creation of the sub-area defers the use and standards to the zoning code, while allowing the use of all high-rise buildings rather than as a conditional use. Right now in the underlying zone, you can have strictly residential buildings as either a conditional mid-rise or a conditional high-rise. And there's a slew of conditions associated with it that make it challenging to not end up triggering a conditional use variance, which may be prohibited by the redevelopment plan, but is also, even if permitted, D variances are something that are generally frowned upon in redevelopment plan and site plans. So what this does is that it eliminates the deference to the underlying code and just allows high-rise buildings on the site by right, without it being a conditional use. Additionally, the land will be developed and subject to the use and bulk standards in the zoning ordinance, but none of the other standards. That'll give additional flexibility. That'll give additional flexibility for
Sorry to
the.
interrupt.
Yeah.
We don't have labels for caller 4 or caller 5, but and caller 2, but they're all unmuted at this time, and we are getting a considerable amount of feedback from that. So if you can mute them.
Yeah. No. There was callers jumping in and out and then just making noise and then leaving. But yes, I did mute them. So back to where we were. So permissible under the bulk standards, but with additional flexibility on design guidelines removed as a requirement, only requiring the use and bulk standards to be controlled, allowing for high rises by right, whether they be fully residential or not mixed use. If you're a high rise and you're mixed use, you're not subject to conditional uses. But the only difference is that you don't have an inherent need to have a ground floor commercial, which may be good or may be bad. It depends. Sometimes ground floor commercial is good, and sometimes it provides a really good purpose, and sometimes it's not necessarily necessary. In this case, the requirement to have it is removed. And that is because I believe that the developer intends to have a ground floor parking deck. Furthermore, the height is changed from the bulk standard in the underlying zone, which caps at 200 feet in the zone, to 300 feet, which attempts to harmonize the heights with the building next door. I mean, the hub, which is at 350 feet. I thought it'd be prudent to, since this isn't the hub, to make sure that they weren't allowed to go beyond the height of the hub. In sorts to protect sort of the uniqueness of the hub site. The FAR was changed to 20, which also matches the FAR for the hub site, given the proximity. The buildings, much like the situation with the hub site, no requirement for a skyplane setback. Also, given the fact that it's quite distant to any affected building of any large scale, and the sliver that we spoke of earlier in the prior redevelopment plan would also create a bit of a distance buffer between this site and the hub, and that parking may be provided on site or in parking facilities within 250 feet. The likely developer has a parking deck across the street that they may be able to integrate with this site due to low demand. And I think that covers, yeah, that about covers all the changes to the redevelopment plan.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. Any questions from the board for Mr. Dominguez?
Yes, this is Bob Cardica. So just to be clear, these amendments, they don't require that parking be provided off-site. They just, it's sort of optional, correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, and there is an existing parking area on this, within this redevelopment area, correct?
This site is the existing parking area in the redevelopment area. The proposed possible site that could create spillover parking is across the street, across Church Street. It's in the downtown redevelopment area,
Bob,
so to
I
speak,
already
but it's
fucking
not
cleaned
in
my
these.
room, Bob. I'm not fucking doing it again.
User 8,
I muted him.
well,
Um,
that's the second or third time that we've had interruptions from that caller. Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you consider maybe removing that caller from the meeting.
Yep.
He
Oh,
left.
he left. think-
Yeah, so they're, as I was saying, they're within the redevelopment plan area in the sense that they're in the downtown redevelopment plan area, but they would not, the parking that they would be potentially using is not within area 14. It's basically across the street. Like, it's literally across the street on Church Street. We're talking developing the old parking deck on the corner of Church and Spring Street, and potential integration of parking with the parking deck on the other side of Church and Spring Street, which is connected to One Spring, the condo tower that's at the corner of Spring Street and Patterson Street.
Yeah, I think I got that.
Dan?
but-
Okay.
Dan, this is Suzanne. So like I brought up before, now given the proximity to the train station, the intended use, and the mechanism that we have in place now with a pileup, is this something we could put into this redevelopment plan to send to the council?
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't necessarily include something in here about the pileup should they maybe, let's say they have a parking requirement on site and then they meet partly off site, that the rest could, I guess, be maybe, I don't know, paid, they can do the pileup, they could pay into
Right.
the pileup, but without it being considered a variance.
Right, and
That just meets the requirement.
it makes sense in this area. It makes sense to me that it should be included with this plan. And I don't know if maybe you want to, because I'm not sure if all of the planning board members are very familiar with it. If you wanted to, I know you did briefly before, but maybe just go over it again in case we can include it.
Sure. So what the pileup creates a mechanism, as I alluded to before, that shortcomings on parking can be, well, they can't be met per se. If you have a shortcoming on parking and you are approved by one of our boards, you can, by the ordinance, you would be approved, but you would have to pay into this trust. I think what you're getting at here is to perhaps just allow them, if there's any spaces that they end up short on, that they would be able to pay for them essentially and not have that count as a deviation or a variance.
That's
yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Yes, but so again, back to the pileup a little bit for some context. The pileup, again, we have a lot of buildings in town that get approved. The city does grant a lot of parking variances. A lot of the parking requirements are subject to RSIS, which is the state residential standard for housing, which is a suburban standard because it's a catch-all for the whole state. It doesn't ideally fit for a dense, walkable, transit-oriented, transit-adjacent
I'm
site
in the
like New
fucking
Brunswick.
Board of Ed meeting. Get the fuck out!
And I'm distracted, so let me refocus. So the goal is that those that then since we grant a lot of parking variances relative to RSIS, we created a lower standard for a slightly lower standard for the pileup, to be fair, and that we would also use the funds generated from those variances to fund, like I said, transit improvements, pedestrian improvements, parking infrastructure, things that provide parking, that meet parking demand, let's say, and that mitigate parking demand. So given the proximity of the train station here, it may not be imprudent to use the pileup in a more direct way, as a sort of experiment, if you will, to see how that works out in terms of it not necessarily being something that you pay after you get a variance, but maybe in lieu of a variance. Did I kind of get where you were coming with this?
That is exactly where I was going with it. It does seem more prudent to just have it included in this plan and let it be available to the developer, as opposed to making him go through, get a variance for the deficiency, where he could just pay in if there was one. And that's exactly where I was going with it. It seems beneficial to all parties involved. That was all I had. That was just my suggestion.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Eithel, I think we're ready to open up for public comment.
Christo, South Edison.
Oh. 1 second, we're just waiting on Mr. Eithel who'll coordinate the public comment section.
Oh, I apologize.
Not a problem. Mr. Eithel, you there? You're on mute.
I'm sorry. All users that are present on the phone, if you can hit *6 to unmute. What I'll do at this time is I will ask if there are any members of the public that would like to comment or have questions regarding the presentation of the amended redevelopment plan. If you are on the platform, the WebEx platform, there is an unmute button and a mute button on the lower left-hand portion of the screen. If you can hit that. At this time, if you could just state your name, and what I'll do is I'll put you in order to ask questions or make presentation. Is there anyone who would like to ask questions or make comments regarding the presentation?
Danielle Moore.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Any other members?
Christo.
Mr. Macropolis, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other members of the public? Okay, Ms. Moore, you're still under oath. You have 5 minutes to ask any questions or making any comments regarding this portion of the testimony that was provided regarding the amendments to the redevelopment plan.
Well, first, I would just like to say, wow, I'm very disappointed in you, Ms. Suzanne Sikora Loving, without saying, wow, you're out of order out of all that cussing you do. Well, wow, whenever I speak the truth, you always say I'm out of order. So it just shows the truth. You just have something against me where I'm the only one that you say you're out of order. Come on,
Moore,
out of all of that went through, it should have been blocked off.
Ms. Moore, I'm going to ask you to focus your comments on the amendment. You'll have an opportunity to speak on general stuff at the end of the meeting.
Well, like I said, once again, very, very disappointing how taxpayers are paying you guys just to vote yes before you even think about doing your research on anything. Once again, and it's very sad due to where you have too many construction sites going on already, too many projects. I don't understand how you're going to do this project and the county's going to do their project at the same time, where you're causing too many roads to be changed, too many roads to be cut off due to where you're disturbing, the angles from ambulance, fire trucks, I've seen it with my own eyes, where I'm wondering, how are you going to really deal with this? With so many construction sites, due to where I saw, was it yesterday or the day before yesterday, issue that the fire department had, getting through these roads with George Street being closed, certain roads. You just have too many projects going at one time. And I don't understand how, like I said, between this project and the county project, due to we're replacing all those sidewalks and closing off the road, can you please tell me when is this project? I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Can you Can you please tell me?
I also think she is correct, but I don't think she should be so hostile and screaming like this one. Let's use indoor voices, okay? Next time, let's talking more respectful on the phone, and then
Just
we will.
mute caller 10, please.
Please, oh my goodness.
Ms. Moore, it's someone's jumping on and interrupting you. I'll add some more time.
And
back.
yes, and I'm getting very disappointed how, like I said, how quiet Suzanne Secor Ludwig is. Wow. Any other time at the meeting, she was very out of order.
You are just being very loud and you're being very disrespectful.
Ms. Moore, please continue.
How can I continue if I keep being interrupted? What, are you going to keep killing my time? What, is that what you're doing this for, and not muting the person?
Ms. Moore.
So I don't get a chance to speak?
Ms. Moore, he's been muted several times as the individual that hopped on several times.
Well, then they should have been they should have been disconnected. Why is Miss Suzanne Secor Ludwig so quiet now? Any other time she would be saying out of order, this and that. I don't understand you, but like I said, I
She's
see
not
every
the chair.
evil eye.
She's not chairing this meeting.
But either way, like I said,
Laura,
it's just
I'm gonna-
sad.
I am the chair of this meeting, and I'm going to ask you to redirect your comments to the proposed amendment.
Well, if I keep getting interrupted, please, what do you expect me to say? I'm asking you, can you please tell me, which I'm not yelling, I just have a way of talking, maybe that's just my phone, I'm not yelling. Due to where I'm asking, would you be able to tell me give me approximately, what, a year, 2 years? When would this project at Farron Mall be started?
Ms. Moore, I believe this is regarding an amendment to a redevelopment plan. It's not a development application, so there's no proposed developer or timetable for development. This is an amendment to a redevelopment plan.
Well, then see, that's what I'm saying. I don't even see thank you. And that's what was said at the county due to where it wasn't nothing. It shouldn't even have been groundbreaking due to where you're not even sure what's to be done on this due to where, like I said, you shouldn't even be voting on this until the county gets finished with their project downtown, and then you'll be able to, instead of guessing what goes here, then what? And
Ms. Moore,
especially
you
with
have
the
1
parking
minute.
situation. The parking situation is already, wow, they voted that they're gonna, all next year, they're gonna keep George Street closed. Wow, nowhere to park already, how that's shutting down the businesses. So I think that's a lot you need to think about as well, due to where, stores that's been down there 30 years, they're closing due to where, George Street being closed. You're closing off too many roads, too many projects at one time. And it's shame that taxpayers are paying you guys, just to vote yes without doing your research. Sad.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Mr. Macropoulos, you're still under oath. Your 5 minutes begin now. If you can
I'm right
unmute
here.
yourself. Okay, if you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're still under oath. Your 5 minutes begins now.
Okay. First, I'd like to start off by saying that I don't think nobody's screaming. A lot of us who are not used to being on these meetings on the phone, and we don't know if the people on the other side can hear us. I can barely hear you guys. And, if that member of the public likes to speak, they have every opportunity when it's their time. They should have been thrown out this meeting. One thing I have to ask is it standard operating procedure for corrupt developers to pay off New Brunswick Planning Board members? As we saw here today,
I'm going to stop you 1 second, and I'm going to ask that any comment or question you have be focused on this particular amendment for the redevelopment.
But you guys said this is public comments.
No, this is on the second.
The amendment to the downtown redevelopment plan. Do you have any comments specific to that?
Are we still having public comments at the end?
Public comment is at the end, but this is not public comment yet. This is specifically for the amendments to the downtown redevelopment plan.
Okay, I'm against these amendments. I think it's corrupt. I think you guys are having shady, corrupt people calling in. to interrupt Miss Danielle Moore, I want to know how much that guy got paid. These are mafia tactics.
Mr.
You're gonna.
Mr. McCall, I'm going to stop you. Do you have a particular question on the actual amendments?
Yes, I do. I have one question, and I'll sign off my time on this question. I want to know how much you guys are getting paid to sell New Brunswick out,
This is
and
not,
I'll
this
see
is
you
not a
guys
question
at then.
focused on this. So, do you have any other question?
Not at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that would close out the public portion. A motion to close would be appropriate.
Can I get a motion then to close public comment?
It's Chris Deltel. I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Yulita Checo, second.
Thank you.
And you could just do all in favor, a voice vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, Mr. Ithal, at this point, if you could provide the same direction that you did for the first amendment that was heard with respects to what the board can vote on and any stipulations that board members have in providing their vote.
Certainly. As with the other amendment to the redevelopment plan, the board members can make a motion to approve or to recommend approval to the governing body. So the recommendation of the planning board would be to recommend the approvals that were presented today by way of amendment, or to make a motion to deny the approvals, or to say that the board did not want those amendments made to the redevelopment plan that were presented this evening. If individual members have certain exceptions, meaning that they believe that some of the items are appropriate and some of them are not, they should at this point also have the opportunity, if they wish, to state which items they are in favor of or which ones they are not in favor of, and that will certainly be transmitted with the recommendation of the planning board to the governing body. As with the last amendment that was presented, this body does not vote to approve or disapprove because this body does not have the authority to enact ordinances. The governing body is the sole body that can enact an ordinance to amend a redevelopment plan. We're only providing the input that we believe that the governing body should consider in either adopting or rejecting an amendment to a redevelopment plan. Chairman Castaneda, if it's appropriate at this time for a motion, I would ask if you can ask the board members to make a motion.
Yes. Can I ask the board members for a motion with respects to the amendments to the downtown redevelopment plan?
This is Suzanne. I'll make a motion to move it, but I want the pileup included in these amendments. So I'll make a motion with that inclusion.
This is Chris Deltel. I'll second the motion with the amendment that Ms. Sikora added.
Mr. Chairman, if I may do the roll call as I did before, and I'm sorry that it's a little bit out of order. Ms. Sikora Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Adorno?
Yes.
Ms. Checo?
Yes.
Mr. Stellatella?
Yes.
Ms. Lopez?
Yes.
Mr. Cardica?
Yes.
And Mr. Castaneda?
I'll be abstaining.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes, I believe, the two presentation items that we have this evening.
Yes, thank you. Before we move to other matters of interest to the public, I want to take this opportunity to address a concern from a member of the public at our last meeting with respects to correspondence involving or matters pertaining to that were held rather in executive session. We stated that as a board that we would look into it to get a better understanding of what happened and what the current situation is. And so, Mr. Ithal, I'd ask if you could provide us with your findings.
Thank you. Members of the board, members of the public, last meeting we were there was a question that was posed with regards to a correspondence that was received by myself after 5 o'clock, if I could address that. First of all, so that the members of the public also understand, and as the board members are aware, this board is an independent administrative body, and it has quasi-judicial authority that's statutorily derived under the municipal land use law. And that can be found under New Jersey statutes, Chapter 40, Section 55D. It does not have unrestrained power to take any and all actions the board feels that it would like to undertake in a unilateral fashion. The board's jurisdiction is limited by law. It's proscribed, so it can only take those actions that the law permits it to take. That being said, the role of the board's attorney varies greatly in New Jersey among different boards. On one end, many boards and their board attorneys act as hearing masters or something equivalent to that, which means that they essentially run the meeting with the chairperson and they make decisions on behalf of the board. On the other end of the spectrum, board attorneys who speak essentially when they're only asked for legal advice. My own personal philosophy is that I lean generally towards the latter, meaning that I will speak when I'm asked to provide legal advice, except to the extent that the law requires the board to act in any particular manner. In that sort of a situation, I will provide the legal analysis that informs the mandatory actions that are required of the board. Now, on August the 24th, I received an email correspondence from an interested party, and that interested party made certain inquiries of myself, asking specifically what the standards were for qualifying an individual as an expert witness. Through a series of emails that were received by and sent to the interested party that followed, I won't catalog each of those. What culminated from that was a September 27th email to the attorney for a developer that received an approval for a parking garage associated with the Cancer Pavilion, Mr. Charles Liebling. I sent a correspondence to the interested party and to Mr. Liebling, and Mr. Liebling was asked to provide by close of business on Friday, October the 1st, a written reply to the assertions and allegations made by the interested party. I asked for that correspondence to be received by me no later than close of business on Friday, October the 1st, so that I could analyze and possibly inform or take action on that allegation on the Monday, October the 4th planning board meeting. A response correspondence was in fact received by myself prior to close of business on October the 1st, and I promptly forwarded that to the interested party. I drafted a letter, a 5-page letter that had a factual background and went through the legal issues that were presented, the allegations that were made, and the legal conclusion. That was provided to all parties, the interested party, to Mr. Liebling, and to the board after the October 4th meeting. At the October 4th planning board meeting, the board was advised of a possible or threatened litigation, which would be an item that would be permitted to be discussed in closed session. In order for an item to be considered to be a possible or threatened litigation, it's not necessary for a party to officially declare their intention to initiate litigation, but it is only necessary to invoke the exception to the litigation portion, or the litigation exception, I should say, to the Open Public Meetings Act, if I prudently believe that there is a possibility of litigation arising out of actions or inactions from the board. Based on that, I asked that the board go into executive session. A resolution which is required to be adopted prior to going into executive session with a listing of what the item is that would be discussed in executive session was in fact adopted by this board, and a discussion pursued in executive session where I informed the board of a possibility of litigation, and I informed the board that I'd authored the October 4th letter, which they received copies of, and the legal position that it had within that letter. And I also indicated that I would be releasing that letter to the interested party, Mr. Liebling, and that letter would be available to the general public through the Open Public Records Act. The expression of a legal position of the planning board is not only the responsibility of a planning board attorney, but it is in fact the duty of the planning board attorney. And as the board attorney, it's also my duty to inform the board members of that legal position. And that was done by way of my October 4th letter and the debriefing that I provided in closed session, where the board members also had an opportunity to ask any questions of me regarding the threatened litigation or potential litigation in closed session. The interested party dispatched a letter to my attention by email on October 4th, but that letter was dispatched after close of business hours, shortly after 5 o'clock, and I did not know of its existence until the next day. So that letter was not taken into consideration in writing my October the 4th correspondence or opinion letter, which the board and the public have now. I've reviewed that correspondence, however, shortly after, and actually on October the 5th, and I will, as the board members are aware, because they have it as well, it consists of essentially a summary of of the interested parties' already known allegations and a string of emails, 3 email threads that the interested party had sent that were unanswered correspondence with the THA consulting firm. Those letters, as I have indicated, have been provided to the board already. Those letters do not contain any new or relevant information that was provided by the interested party that require either an amendment or a rescission of the legal determinations and conclusions that I made in my October 4th letter. All parties have and continue to retain any rights and all rights that are available to those parties under the law, and no additional action is required to be taken by the board at this time. Mr. Chairman, that is my statement for this evening.
Thank you. And so we'll now then continue to section 7, other matters of interest to the public. I believe, Dan, you'll take it over at this point.
Yeah, thank you. By this point in the meeting, I had forgotten that I was the secretary. Thanks, Arvin and Katie, for carrying for a bit there. Matters of interest to the public. Seeing that there are not that many members of the public present on the call, I'll open it up generally to any member of the public who wishes to speak. If you're currently muted and you need to unmute yourself, if you're on the telephone, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. If you are on computer, you can press the little microphone button at the bottom that says mute or unmute. So I'll open it up. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment? Anything general public comment? All right, Mr. Metropolis.
Danielle Moore.
Okay, Ms. Moore.
Charlie Cradaville.
All right, anyone at all? Last call. Seeing none. Chairman Castaneda. Let's go alphabetically. First up is Mr. Charlie Cradaville.
Mr. Cradaville, you can proceed. Your 5 minutes start now.
Yes, good evening. Just wanted to wish everybody a very happy holiday season and, look forward to, returning to meetings in person as soon as possible. I think that, the best practice is to have a hybrid where people can still call in for whatever reason, but to have the meetings in person. There's definitely spaces in the downtown that can accommodate it, and I think that it's time to do that. So other than that, seriously, have a happy holiday to everyone on the call, and wish you nothing but the best. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Mr. Cradaville.
All right. Next up is Mr. Metropolis.
Jersey Watch, a YouTube channel broadcasting worldwide. May I continue?
You have your 5 minutes, Mr. Metropolis.
Thank you. All right. So I want to know if it's standard operating procedure for corrupt developers to pay off New Brunswick Planning Board members. Even though it's not a planning board member per se, still on the board, Secretary Dominguez, I see you had a conflict of interest. I was gonna ask you why, but I see what the conflict of interest is now. Dominguez, being the secretary representing Farron, the Farron Fantasy, that's what Charlie Cradaville calls it, the Farron Fantasy. Your first priority should be to New Brunswick, but it seems, you know, even this shady developer group, Farron, they could have hired anybody. They went straight to somebody who was already serving on the board. I mean, that's absolutely disgusting. Yeah, I'd like these meetings to open back up because I'd like to look at each and every one of you in the eye. It's different when meetings are in person. You know, you can look at someone in the eye, you can see if they're genuine, if they're full of crap. And, you know, my question to Mr. Dominguez is this. When I go to the Edison Planning or Zoning Board meetings, they do not allow me to have public comment like I have here in New Brunswick, so I do appreciate that. If the city, say Edison, refuses to have public comments, one of the questions I have, is it illegal not to allow, would that mean every planning and zoning board meeting they've had the past for years, or have they been illegal? Yeah, I'd like to know. Dominguez, are you on the phone right now?
I am on the phone.
You're on the phone? Who else is on? What are some other names? I'd like, starting with Secretary Dominguez with the whole planning board, you know, I'd like you guys to come out and say, yes, the Greek-Armenian genocide is a historical event. Okay? I'd like you guys to come out and say,
you know,
hey.
I'm just, you know, I understand your, you know, this public comment, but I'm going to ask you to at least focus it on, you know, just the planning board itself, or, you know, stuff that
No,
we.
I am.
Okay.
If you give me a moment, I'll explain myself more clear. I'd like the New Brunswick Planning Board as a body to make a statement to the whole world and say, hey, here in New Brunswick, we know about the Greek-Armenian genocide. We know the genocidal Turks were behind it. I'd like the New Brunswick Planning Board to come out as a body, you know, and say, hey, the Jewish Holocaust, that it happened, that it's a historical event.
1 second. I'm gonna ask you to, again, keep your comments to stuff that we can do. I mean, I can appreciate you having a position on this topic, but this topic is not a matter for the planning board.
So I'm going to take that the planning board refuses to acknowledge the Greek-Armenian genocide, refuses to acknowledge the Jewish Holocaust. You could have just allowed me to continue to speak. This is public comments. The more you interrupt me, you are breaking the law. I'd like to take my time back. I reserve my time, and I'm calling in basically. I've called in once a year, every year, and you guys refuse.
You've got 1 minute left.
You guys refuse to acknowledge the Greek-Armenian genocide. What's the problem? It's a historical fact. There's been many other planning boards, zoning boards, town council as whole bodies where they recognize historical events. And, you know, I wanted New Brunswick to be progressive, to be ahead of the curve and say, hey, yeah, you know, Turkey, they're a bunch of genocidal maniacs. They went in a fanatical, radical religious pogrom to just wipe out the Greeks and Armenians. I'd like the New Brunswick Planning Board to admit this, to say, hey, we as a board, we've spoken about this. There's nothing wrong with us admitting a historical fact. Just ask yourselves, what's the problem with you guys just admitting the fact of the Greek-Armenian genocide?
I've given you, you know, quite a bit of latitude. I understand your position. This is not something that
That's time.
So I thank you for your time and understand that this is something that the board wouldn't do as a collective.
Do you believe Black Lives Matter, sir?
Sir, your time is up. I thank you.
All right.
Can I get the
next?
Next
up, final speaker is Ms. Danielle Moore. Ms. Moore, are you still there with us?
Yes, I am, and I pray that you block the people so I can speak my time and not be interrupted.
We did block them then as they came in. People sometimes log off and log back in. We'll cross those bridges as they
No,
crop back up.
I think you were just doing it on purpose, just for me not to speak. Even though I haven't been into your meetings for a good while, will you please tell me who's in charge of the planning board now?
At this point in time, Ms. Moore, the chair has rescinded his position. So as vice chair, I am in charge, at least for this meeting, and then we'll vote again next year.
Okay, thank you. Well, I surely hope you do a better job without anger issues, better than Suzanne Secor Ludwig, just from hearing the truth. And I will say, wow, it's very disappointing to you how you are really just being paid to say yes, not thinking about the city. But wow, I tell you, if I could, out of all these constructions, over 5 sites you have going, Jersey Avenue and Van Dyke, Farron Mall, Somerset and Plum Street, Somerset Street by Robert Wood Johnson, Easton Avenue, and now Delafield, with all this digging with these rats running up and down the neighborhood in broad daylight, while catching over 30 rodents, while everyone is paying for so much extermination in the area. Wow, if I can push all these things to go to Rutgers Village, I surely will. Too many construction sites going at one time, and I meant the rodents is outrageous, where you can't even sit on your porch without seeing rats running up and down the road. I've been in New Brunswick all my life, 44 years, never seen nothing like this. But all you care about saying yes, yes, yes before you think and do research. Well, I do more research than any of you on the planning board, due to where what? Just as well as I stopped you from going to 131 Jersey Avenue from all the pictures and research I did with the flooding. Wow, you would have bought, the Board of Education would have bought 131? Wow, how many times has it flooded since I really stopped you? Wow, how I'm the one speaking on, with the railroad tracks. It's good to see Amtrak starting to build a safety fence. But wow, like I said, due to where none of you still understand the situation. Wow, look how fast they knocked down the school, started building. Wow, we hardly done anything over there at 50 Jersey Avenue. But wow, some of you surely need to look at the police reports every day or every other day. Where wow, just witnessed picking up an unconscious man over there? Wow, please, when will you realize no matter how much money you put the city and the county, taxpayers' money they keep using, it's still not safe until the New Brunswick Police Department gets involved. After spending all that money with the park from the city and the county, redoing the road and all, wow, it's only gotten worse over there. How we were lied to saying, taxpayers' money wasn't going to be used. But wow, how much money being used already, and still no digging yet, due to where the Board of Education lied and said how many tons of dirt was taken out of there. Wow, it wasn't even a hole dug over there yet. With the Board of Education not lying, wow, saying in Chuck O'Donnell's newspaper back in April and May that after the groundbreaking that this was to start construction, and still nothing yet. Very sad how you were just being paid to say, thinking about money, 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 just to say yes, yes, yes before you do the right thing. And it's just very sad how, due to where, like I said, tearing down the history of New Brunswick, where it's not even no longer the city of New Brunswick, it's the city of Robert Wood Johnson, Rutgers, and Johnson & Johnson more and more. And it's sad how you are tearing down the historical of New Brunswick. Just for what? Luxury high-rise? Wow, pray to God that we don't have an earthquake due to where too many high-rise buildings going up, too much construction. But like I said, it's sad that none of you do your research. It's like you really don't even care of what goes on. And wow, how many times do I tell you, wow, I provide evidence of what I speak? Please, some of you need to go really look at the police reports of what's going on. How many people are being assaulted, robbed over there, drugs over there. But wow, it was all about just yes, 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 same thing everywhere, every place that you do before you do your research. And I have to say, I find something's going to go wrong, sad to say, but I'm a person with, like I said, when something gets warning, due to where you should have waited until the county gets finished their project and then continue with
That's
making
time is more.
decisions with Sharon Mall. Due to
That's
where,
time.
like I said, you have extremely too many construction sites going
Moore?
on at one time.
Ms. Moore, that is
My time is up?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. All right. I think that was the people that we had for public comment, correct, Mr. Dominguez?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Dominguez got my wife pregnant.
Before we move, and before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I want to personally wish everybody on the board, city personnel, and the public at large a very safe and healthy holiday, and look forward to seeing everyone in some form or fashion in the new year. That being said, can I get a motion to adjourn?
It's Chris Stiltell, I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Manny, and I'll second that motion.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Have a great holiday.